You ever get those moments where you get super motivated about something and start pumping out work at inhuman speeds, all while actually enjoying it? It's pretty great, right? On the other hand, do you get moments where you feel lazy and unmotivated, and no matter what task you force yourself into doing, time crawls by in the most slow and excruciating way, and nothing seems to get done? Not so great, right? I feel like the general consensus in the self improvement space has been that motivation is pretty useless, and in a scenario like that, you should just trudge on and bear through the pain. But what if I showed you how to turn situation 2 into situation 1 on command? Well, that's exactly what this video aims to do, except in a relatively summarized way because honestly, we could talk about this topic for hours. If you have ever lived life, this graph might look familiar to you, where your performance goes up and then down and then up and then down with the fluctuation of your motivation. And when you're down here, it really doesn't feel like you can do anything to get out of it other than just wait and keep using your discipline to hopefully get motivation back. Well, here's how motivation actually works and how you can control that to make sure you're not stuck at that bottom area with nothing to do about it. So, we're going to go about this by breaking motivation down into its simplest components and then building up from there. So, in essence, all motivation is based on some form of stakes, which means something is to be gained or lost. You have to have a reason for doing something to be motivated. Now, what can these reasons be? Well, it can be a reward, which refers to a short-term reward that you get for doing this habit. Then you can have punishments, which is basically the short-term consequence for not doing this habit. And then there's implications, which is basically the long-term results of doing this habit over an extended period of time, right? So if we're thinking about an example like meditation, your reward might be that streak you get on the app every time you do it. The punishment could be, well, losing that streak if you don't meditate. But the real reason you're doing this, the implication, the long term result, is that you're more present, aware, right? And none of these are necessarily better than the other, they are just different in what they represent. So, based off of this, it follows that logically, if we just maximize every single one of these, then we should be maximally motivated. So, how can we design a reward so that it's most motivating? Well, thankfully, we don't have to solve this ourselves because salesmen, for the longest time, have had to figure out how can we have a reward, in this case of products, so enticing that it motivates people to buy, right? They've had to think this through. How can we make rewards motivating? And luckily for us, one person, Alex Hormozi, has made this value equation. And you might have seen this online before. It basically says that the dream outcome multiplied by the perceived likelihood of achievement, all divided by the time delay and the effort and sacrifice required, is what gets you your total value. And here we can basically say that the value in this case is equivalent to how motivating that reward is. So basically, if we're trying to make a reward appealing, we have to optimize for its desirability, its perceived likelihood of obtainment, its immediacy, and its ease of achievement. And if those are a lot of big words, let me give you an example, right? So let's say you want to go to the gym and get jacked. Well, you might think, well, getting jacked is a pretty great reward, right? Because it's very desirable. And this is the trap a lot of people fall into. Because if you think about it, okay, it's desirable. Everybody wants to get jacked. It does that. But that's all they think about. They don't think about the other three. The perceived likelihood of obtainment, well, a lot of the time, you're not certain that just because you go to the gym, you're going to get jacked. There might be a lot of doubt in your head. You might be like, oh, but maybe I'm not doing it right. Maybe just for me, it's more difficult because X, Y, Z. So perceived likelihood of obtainment is usually pretty low. And the immediacy, wow, like it's going to take you a while to get jacked. So the immediacy is like super low. And the ease of achievement also very low. Like you have to go to the gym a lot to get that reward. So it's actually not as motivating as you might think. Even though just because the desirability is so high, it does make up for these other things, right? That doesn't mean you shouldn't use getting jacked as a motivator in general. It's just to say, a lot of the time people only think about the first step while there's three more that they never consider, and that's the big mistake. Now, if we're optimizing this for the strength of a punishment instead, we can just simply invert this, where instead we're trying to optimize for its level of unattractiveness, the perceived likelihood of occurrence of the punishment, its again immediacy, and the ease of avoidance. So, if you maximize all of these for all of your rewards and punishments, you should be completely maximally motivated, right? And if we think about it, every single sort of stake can somehow be represented using this value equation, which is funny because who would have thought that sales tools would be useful in motivating ourselves, but they are. So clearly, all of these individual parts, every reward, punishment, and implication that you have get chucked into some formula in here, and out gets spit out your total stakes. What exactly is this formula? Well, it's your total stakes is basically just the aggregate sum of every single reward, implication, punishment, and so on and so forth. You likely have a bunch of these for every single habit that you have, right? And the sum of all of these is going to be the total stakes. So what are some easy ways that we can increase the stakes for our habit? Because we've been talking a lot about theory, it works like this, it works like that. Okay, well, how can you apply it? Well, one of the easiest and most underrated ways is using streaks. Let's think about it. Streaks are decently desirable. We want to extend our streaks because they don't really mean anything, but humans are kind of stupid like that, and that comes to our advantage sometimes. The other three, on the other hand, are very good here. It has a 100% likelihood of attainment. As long as you do the habit, there's a 100% chance that your streak goes up. So that's good. It's fully immediate. The instant you do the habit, the streak goes up. And the ease of achievement depends on the difficulty of the habit, but usually it's not that much because it's just one habit. But there's a secret trick that streaks have up their sleeves, which is that they function as both a reward and a punishment. And this is where the big power comes in, because the bigger your streak is, the bigger the punishment is. Because just imagine this for a second. Imagine that you have an over 100-day streak at something. You're really not gonna want to lose that streak, because if you do, that's 100 days of work that just went down the drain. Now, one example of this would be, I used to have an over 200-day meditation streak. And the way I got there wasn't so much the systems I had behind that habit, it was more so the streak itself. Because you can imagine that when you have a streak that big, you'll do anything in your power to not lose it. And that's the goal here, right? Again, the punishment here of losing your streak is 100% likelihood, fully immediate, and the ease of achievement is again dependent on the habit, but it's pretty easy to not lose your streak most of the time, right? Next up, habit contracts. Now, I don't see enough people talking about this because these are just like stake cheat codes, honestly. You basically say, I, your name, will do the habit, or else a punishment. And this is really nice because if we look at the four factors, it's all just depends. Because you can literally just like design a punishment from scratch to be optimized for every single one of these factors, right? So ideally, we want to have a really big punishment that will happen 100% likelihood immediately the instant you fail that action, and the action itself should be pretty easy, in which case you're basically guaranteed to do that action. So this is an actionable step for you. Go make a habit contract and sign it at the bottom so it feels official, and that way you feel more obligated to stick to it. The next step is finding your why, right? This is more of an implications thing. So just start with a piece of paper and write the goal you're trying to achieve with this habit. So with the gym, it might be getting jacked, right? With business, it might be reaching a certain amount of income per month. So you're just going to write down the goal and you're going to ask yourself why. And then you're going to answer that. And then you're going to ask why again. And you're just going to keep asking why until you can't go any deeper. And that's going to be a core reason, a driver that you have that you can then use, right, to motivate yourself as an implication. So one example of this could be, I want to make 10K a month through entrepreneurship. Why? Well, I'm really scared of getting a 9 to 5 and being stuck slaving away for a big company. Why? Maybe you're scared of mediocrity. And why is that? Well, perhaps you have a base level of narcissism that forces you to prove yourself to be better than other people. And this example actually isn't from me, it's from Charlie Morgan, who you might know as being a big YouTuber with 100,000 subscribers, and he makes a lot of money. So this can take you to some dark places sometimes, but embrace that, because if it motivates you, you'd want to know about it so you can use it to motivate yourself more. So there we go, we've solved it. As long as you just do these things, you'll be motivated forever. Or will you? Because if you think about it, a lot of the time, right, if this was the full explanation and if this just solved motivation, if you looked at your life and tried to apply this logic, a lot of the time, the actual stakes present don't really change that much, right? You get introduced new things into your life and new tasks, whatever, but with the usual habits, right? For going to the gym, the actual stakes at hand don't change all that often, but still your motivation goes up and down wildly. So what's going on there? This can't explain it. All right, I just want to take a moment away from the video to tell you about the free school community we have, where you'll get access to all the files I use in the videos, and additionally a full free course on how to double your productivity, along with worksheets that will help you build strong consistency systems. So if this sounds like something that you might be into, which is again for absolutely free, then join. It's going to be the first link in the description, and the results speak for themselves. Everybody who's joined has been getting incredible boosts to their consistency, so join right now. And with that said, let's get back to the video, right? So think about when you, for example, watch that video or that podcast or that movie that really just got you motivated for some reason. That video did not like physically go into your life and implant a new stake into it and get you motivated that way. It likely just made you more aware of a stake that already existed, which brings us to the next step in understanding motivation. Your total stakes is not what leads to your overall motivation level, it's the total perceived stakes, right? It's the level of stakes that you are perceiving in that present moment that determines how motivated you are. Because there can be incredible stakes at hand. For all you know, there could be this one habit and the whole world depends on it, right? You have to do it or the whole world will just disappear, cease to exist, right? But if you don't know that, if you're not consciously thinking about it, or even if you knew it but you just forgot about it, you're not going to be motivated to do that thing because you're not currently perceiving those stakes. So if we were to then rewrite this equation, we would say that total stakes times the percent of those total stakes you're actually perceiving is the total perceived stakes, which is the amount of motivation you feel. And we've already talked about the total stakes. Let's talk about how you increase the percent perceived. I mean, first of all, you can just discover more, right? Because there are likely a lot of stakes out there that already exist, but you just haven't quite discovered. So let's say you're trying to stretch more. One way to get yourself motivated might just be to watch podcasts about why stretching is important. And from there, you'll learn a lot more stakes, and that will get you motivated. The other way is to use the stakes you already know and just remind yourself of them. Because if you think about it, what that video did is it just took the stakes you already knew and reminded you of it, which got you motivated again. So if you could systematically remind yourself of the stakes, then you could systematically motivate yourself, or at least so is the theory, right? So how does this work in practice? One option is to use a video, and this would ideally be a self-recorded video. So you would sit down and honestly, you could just take out your phone. You could even just use a voice memo and just talk to yourself for a second for maybe a few minutes, right? So you can listen to it every day or however much you would about all of the stakes that you really need to remember that are really important to you. And then at a regular time throughout the day, you would listen to this recording to get your mind in that state to remember those stakes and to hopefully get yourself motivated. And one thing to notice is that we can't really constantly have 100% perception of these stakes at all times, right? We can't constantly have 100% stake perception. That's just not really possible. We can't constantly be listening to this video on repeat all throughout the day. That's just not going to work. So we have to choose wisely at what points we're going to spike our motivation up, because now we can sort of control it. And if you think about it, there are a few key moments in your day usually that really determine how things will go. These are very important moments that can lead you either down into the path of, oh, I'm just going to scroll for the rest of the day, or if you take the right action, into the path of, I'm going to be productive for the rest of the day. And in those moments is where you want to implant the motivation, so hopefully you take the right route that's going to lead you to a good day, right? Another way to think about this is by inverting, right? Charlie Munger popularized saying, invert, always invert. So how can we invert this question to think about it another way? Well, how could we keep these stakes completely out of our mind? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the saying, out of sight, out of mind, or remove all triggers from your environment. So instead, if we just put it in sight, it'll be in mind, right? Just put a bunch of triggers. So, for example, if you have your habit contract signed, you can put that up on your wall or on your desk or wherever you will see it often. And the more you see it, the more you are reminded of those stakes. Put your environment in a way so that you are constantly reminded of those stakes. But there is really one big caveat here that is going to get in the way of your attempts to remind yourself. And that is that the most important thing you need is variety. And I've done it all nice and colorful for you guys here to illustrate variety. But why do we need variety? Well, for anybody who's ever tried to put something in their environment to try to remind themselves of something will know exactly what I mean. To give you an example, I want to remind myself of something, so I put a post-it note on my monitor, literally on my monitor, where I probably look at it for hours and hours a day. I must, theoretically, see it a lot and think about it a lot. In reality, after the first 2 days, I completely forgot about it. My eye got used to it being there, and I literally forgot it on my monitor for months. Many, many, many months. It just stood there until eventually I remembered, maybe I should take these off now. And so I took them off. But the point is, any change to your environment, especially a visual change to your environment, or any sensory change, right? You'll also notice if a new sound, like background noise, comes into your environment, at first you notice it because it's a change in your environment. But then after a while, that background noise, you don't really consciously register it. If you've ever been talking to someone and there was this really loud noise in the background you didn't notice until suddenly it stopped. And then you were like, oh, wow, there was a lot of noise, but I just didn't realize. It's because you were used to it. We get used to things if we see it over and over. We get desensitized. And the exact same thing will happen as you try to remind yourself of your stakes. If you play the same video over and over and over and over every day, you will get desensitized to it. And this is the biggest reason why people who try to control motivation fail to do it. Because they watch this one video and they're like, wow, this video really motivated me. Let me watch it again. Every time you watch it, it gets less and less motivating. It's like it drops off and plateaus. It starts really high, but by the time you watch it a second time, it's already half as motivating. And then the third time, it's 25%. And then the next time, it's 12.5. It just decreases exponentially. So we want to have variety. The changes to your environment, the stakes at hand, how you present those stakes to yourself, you want to change it up, right? So if we set extreme stakes, optimized for motivation using the value equation, and we frequently remind ourselves of these stakes, and we regularly add variation and development to steps 1 through 2, constantly repeating those, not constantly, but frequently enough, then we will be significantly more motivated, right? And you don't really even need to do these 2 steps as much. As long as you do the first step, where you add in streaks and you add in a habit contract and you figure out more stakes that exist, your baseline level of motivation for that habit will automatically just go way up, right? And of course, There's a lot more to this, right? This does not mean you have solved consistency as a whole. This does not mean you can go out there and your motivation will stop fluctuating. There will always be a level of up and down with your motivation, always. But first of all, this is the first step to significantly just boosting it, right? It might have been going up and down here, but now it's going up and down up here, which is a lot better. And there's more to this, right? We can talk about dopamine loading, dopamine detox, all the dopamine things that are also related to motivation. And there is many things we can get into, but this is generally the 20% of actions that will get you 80% of the results, right? And if you want the download for this file, this whole thing, and the action steps in it, if you want, will be in the free school community, which is the first link in the description. But that is all for this video, so go out there and start implementing.